No, Domenic, thank you for joining us, sir. Can an employer do this?
Well, generally speaking, yes. The Supreme Court back in 1905 determined that compulsory vaccinations are constitutional so long as they're reasonably within the public interest. The EEOC back in December published some guidelines. There are some exceptions. So if you have a disability or if you have a religious belief, there are exceptions. But generally, look, public-facing businesses like restaurants are in a difficult position. On one hand, they want to protect their workforce, other employees and their customers, because the virus is obviously dangerous and potentially fatal. On the other hand, you can see individual workers have concerns about their personal health. In this case, fertility not really falling under the ADA.
What if an employee is forced to take the vaccine in order to keep their job, and then something negative happens to that person? We've talked about some pretty significant side effects to some of these vaccines.
Well, we've seen some side effects, but generally they've been shown to be effective. And, you raise an interesting question, though. What if you require your whole workforce to take the vaccine, again, unless they have that religious belief exception or unless they have some underlying disability, and unknown to them, they fall seriously ill if they're that one in several 100,000 or one in a small statistic. But it's important to note that the Red Hook Tavern in this particular case they did lay her off, they did fire her, but they basically opened the door for her to come back if she changed her mind. Now, what they could have done differently is given her more time, because no one's going to be able to jump on a website and get a vaccine tomorrow. It's probably she probably couldn't have got the vaccine in a few weeks. And that's what she was asking. She was asking to study whether or not it would be safe for fertility purposes.
But Domenic, my question was, could the employer be held liable if you're forced to take a vaccine and something negative does come as a result of that? I mean, we talked about people getting gangrene.
No, because there's not a direct causation there. The employer is basically acting in the public interest and trying to protect its workforce and its customers. So, the employer is not the reason that the person fell ill in that situation. It would be hard. What I'm saying is it would be hard to show that it's the direct fault of the employer, because the individual has an opportunity not to work somewhere else, for example, where they're not publicly facing customers every day or in close proximity to other workers.
So when it comes to health, what are the limits as to what an employer can do?
Well, it has to be reasonable. The restriction has to be reasonable. You can impose, if someone has, for example, I mentioned before, a religious belief that would prevent them from getting the vaccine, that would not be permitted. You can't force someone.
So just to be clear, Domenic, just to be clear, if she said that she had a religious objection to taking it, that would be a different scenario than saying because
if she came in, for example, on the other side, if she came in with a doctor's note that said, listen, I can't take the vaccine. The doctor says it would be unwise for this person to take the vaccine because they have this condition, and there was a medical reason not to take the vaccine, that would be different as well.
I just wonder,
the restaurant would probably have a duty to accommodate there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just go back, especially with this particular situation, knowing that she and her husband were trying to get pregnant. What if she was forced to take that vaccine, and then as a result of taking that vaccine, it interferes in her fertility, and then she cannot have a child? And then you're saying the employer
but there's been,
would not be
let's
liable.
be clear, there's been no proof of that. It's a possibility, like, anything's a possibility. And if there's a small percentage chance, that's her decision. And you can certainly feel for her. And it's a balancing test. Like I said, one can understand personal health concerns of certain individuals here, too.
Yeah. And just to clarify, you had used the term before, vaccines in history have been compulsory at times. Who makes them compulsory? Is that the government?
Yes. So in the 1905 case I cited before, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the state made it compulsory for vaccination for the public. And the court said, as long as it's the mandatory nature of the vaccination is not arbitrary nor oppressive, so long as it doesn't go beyond what's reasonably required. So I'll give you an example. In this case, if it's a restaurant worker, you're in close proximity to your customers, to patrons of the restaurant and other employees. If you're an office worker, for example, you can work from home. If you're worried about fertility, potentially that employer, that office working environment, say, well, you don't have to take the vaccine. You can work from home if there's a religious belief or a medical accommodation. It depends on the circumstances.
Domenic,
It's a very fact-specific test.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you enlightening us on that. We wanted to let folks know, if we can take a look, I believe Joe Biden is